It was a peaceful morning in the mountains surrounding the small town of Pine Valley. The sun was just beginning to emerge, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, and a gentle breeze carried the fresh scent of trees and damp soil. Hidden within this serene landscape was a danger that no one could have imagined, except perhaps for a creature with sharp instincts and keen eyes. Pine Valley was a town where everyone knew each other, and people lived in harmony with the nature around them. The dense forests and crystal-clear rivers were home to a variety of wildlife, including the majestic and cautious population of gray wolves, which were rarely seen by the residents. Among these wolves, one in particular stood out for its intelligence and bravery. It was known by the few who spotted it as Gray Wolf, a creature that inspired both admiration and respect. The story that unfolds now begins on a day that seemed like any other but would soon prove to be different from all the rest. That morning, the Gray Wolf was on patrol, its silent steps moving through the shadows of the trees as it inspected its pack's territory. Its senses were alert, and something in the air made it uneasy. A strange odor, mixed with a familiar scent of the forest, caught its attention. A few miles from where the wolf was, a small team of firefighters, led by Captain Jonathan Harris, was finishing a routine patrol. Captain Harris was an experienced man, known for his courage and dedication to his work. He had faced many dangerous situations in his career, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to encounter that day. Along with him were Sarah, a young firefighter with a heart of gold, and Mike, a veteran of the team who always had a story to tell. The three had become a family over the years, facing fires and saving lives side by side. That morning, they had gone out for a routine inspection in the forested areas near the town, checking for fire hazards due to the prolonged drought that had hit the region in recent weeks. As they were checking an area near an old lookout point, Sarah noticed something strange. There was a peculiar smell in the air, something that shouldn't have been there. She looked around, trying to locate the source, but couldn't see anything unusual. Mike, noticing her unease, approached and sniffed the air as well. "Do you smell that?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Yeah, it's strange. It could be something burning, but I don't see any smoke," Mike replied, frowning. Captain Harris, noticing the growing tension between the two, decided it was best to investigate the area further. "Let's take a closer look. It could be a small fire or something we need to check out," he said, as the three headed in the direction where Sarah had detected the smell. Meanwhile, the Gray Wolf was on high alert. The scent of smoke it had detected was coming from a dense area of the forest, far from human sight. The wolf knew something was wrong. Wolves have an almost supernatural instinct for detecting danger, and its instinct was screaming for it to act. Without hesitation, the Gray Wolf began to move quickly in the direction of the source of the smell, its eyes gleaming with determination. As it approached the area, the sight that met its eyes made its heart race. There were small but voracious flames licking the base of several trees, hidden in the densest part of the forest. It was a potential wildfire that, if not controlled quickly, could devastate the entire area, threatening not only the wildlife but also the town of Pine Valley. The Gray Wolf knew that it couldn't stop the fire alone, but it also knew that it couldn't ignore the imminent danger. With a decision made, it began to run, racing through the forest like a streak of lightning. It needed to find help, and fast. Back at the lookout, Captain Harris and his team were closing in on the area where the smell of smoke seemed strongest. They still couldn't see anything, but there was a growing sense of urgency among them. Then they heard something unexpected, the sound of branches breaking and leaves being trampled, as if something large was moving quickly through the forest. Suddenly, the Gray Wolf burst into the clearing where the firefighters were. Its eyes glowed intensely, and its behavior was clearly different from any other wolf they had ever seen. It wasn't there to attack or defend its territory. It was there for a reason they didn't yet understand. The wolf stopped a short distance from the firefighters, and instead of fleeing as would be expected, it stayed where it was, looking directly at them. Harris, Sarah, and Mike froze, unsure of how to react. The wolf seemed to want to communicate with them, and for a moment, There was a silent connection between the team and the animal. Then the gray wolf began to move again, but this time it looked back as if expecting them to follow. Captain Harris, still stunned by what was happening, gestured for his team to stay calm. "I don't know what's going on here, but something tells me we should follow that wolf," he said, feeling an intuition he couldn't ignore. And so, without hesitation, the team followed the gray wolf in the direction it was leading them, unaware that they were about to face a challenge that would change their lives forever. The gray wolf ran with a determination that was almost palpable. It knew that time was running out and that every second counted. The firefighting team followed closely behind, their hearts racing both from adrenaline and the uncertainty of what they were about to encounter. The forest around them was dense, with branches and roots that made passage difficult, but the wolf navigated through it with the grace and speed of an animal that knew every inch of that territory. As they advanced, the smell of smoke grew stronger, and Sarah was the first to voice what everyone was feeling. "Something is very wrong here. We need to hurry." Her voice was filled with urgency, and both Captain Harris and Mike knew she was right. Soon, they arrived at an area where the forest became even thicker, and the gray wolf slowed its pace, stopping in front of a wall of trees. It turned its head to look at the firefighters as if trying to communicate that the danger was just ahead. Harris, without taking his eyes off the wolf, signaled for his team to prepare. "Stay alert. Something tells me we're about to find the source of that smoke." Carefully, they followed the wolf through the barrier of trees, and when they finally made it through, the sight that greeted them was terrifying. A part of the forest was on fire, and the flames were spreading rapidly, fueled by the dry vegetation. The flames climbed the trees like malevolent fingers reaching for the sky, and the heat was intense enough that they all instinctively stepped back. For a moment, there was a deathly silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire. The gray wolf, standing beside the firefighters, watched the flames with an intensity that seemed almost human. Harris was the first to find his voice. "This is much worse than I imagined. If we don't act quickly, the entire valley could catch fire." Captain Harris immediately began giving orders. "Sarah, Mike, we need reinforcements and all the equipment we can get. Go back to the truck and call for backup. I'll try to contain the fire here as much as I can until you get back." Sarah and Mike nodded and ran back in the direction they had come from, while Harris stayed behind, already beginning to set up an improvised barrier to try to stop the fire from spreading further. He used all his years of experience to calculate the best way to deal with the situation, but he knew that alone he wouldn't be able to control the flames for long. As he worked, the gray wolf stayed close, watching Harris's every move. It was almost as if the wolf understood the gravity of the situation and was waiting to see what more it could do to help. Harris, aware of the wolf's presence, began to talk to it, even though he knew the animal probably wouldn't understand his words. "You brought us here for a reason, didn't you? You knew something was wrong. Now we just need a miracle to get through this." Minutes that felt like hours passed until Sarah and Mike returned with equipment and reinforcements. The fire truck appeared at the edge of the forest, and soon other team members were there, preparing to fight the fire. Hoses were unrolled, and streams of water began to douse the flames, creating a hissing sound as the water met the fire. Meanwhile, the gray wolf moved restlessly, its instinct telling it that the danger wasn't over yet. It began sniffing the air again, picking up something that the humans around it couldn't perceive. Suddenly, it turned and started moving toward an area of the forest that had not yet been touched by the fire, but was directly in the path of the advancing flames. Sarah noticed the change in the wolf's behavior and called out to the captain. "Harris, the wolf is heading somewhere. There might be more danger over there." Harris, who was busy coordinating the team, looked in the direction Sarah was pointing and saw the gray wolf disappearing into the forest. Something inside him told him they needed to follow it, even if it meant moving away from the relative safety of the group. "Let's go, Sarah. Mike, stay here and keep helping the team. We're going to follow the wolf and see what else is going on." Without waiting for a response, Harris and Sarah started following the gray wolf again, delving deeper into the forest. The path the wolf was taking led them to an area that, at first glance, didn't seem to have anything special. However, the wolf abruptly stopped in front of a large rock that looked like it had been there for centuries and began sniffing the ground. Sarah and Harris approached, trying to understand what had drawn the wolf's attention to that spot. That's when Harris noticed something that made his heart nearly stop. "Sarah, look here." He pointed to a small crevice in the ground next to the rock. "This isn't just a simple crevice. It looks like there's something down there." Sarah, still trying to comprehend, looked at the captain with confusion. "What do you mean, something down there?" Harris knelt beside the crevice and looked inside, using the flashlight he always carried. The light revealed something he hoped he'd never see. There was fuel seeping into the soil and accumulating in an underground cavern. "Sarah, we're standing on a ticking time bomb. If the fire reaches here, everything's going to blow." Sarah's face paled as she realized the gravity of the situation. "We need to get out of here now, and we have to warn the others." The gray wolf, which had sensed the danger before the humans did, stood still, its eyes fixed on Harris and Sarah as if waiting for their next move. Harris knew they didn't have much time to think. He quickly stood up and gave the order, "Get back to the truck and warn everyone. We need to evacuate this area immediately." Sarah didn't hesitate and ran back to alert the team. Captain Harris stayed for a moment, looking at the gray wolf with a mixture of admiration and gratitude. "You saved us today, my friend. Now we need to make sure everyone gets out of here safely." With one last look at the wolf, Harris also began to run, leaving the gray wolf behind as he headed back to the team. The fire was still raging, but now there was a new and more terrifying danger they needed to face. The tension in the forest was palpable. The fire continued to spread, and now, with the discovery of the underground cavern filled with fuel, the danger had become even more imminent. Sarah ran as fast as she could to warn the other team members, while Captain Harris kept his eyes on the forest, fearing what might happen if the fire reached the unstable area. When Sarah reached the spot where the other firefighters were battling the flames, she shouted to get everyone's attention. "Guys, we need to evacuate immediately. There's a cavern full of fuel just ahead. If the fire reaches that point, there's going to be a massive explosion." The faces of her colleagues darkened as the gravity of the situation became clear. Mike, who had been coordinating the efforts, quickly grabbed the radio and started issuing orders for the team to retreat. "Everyone, fall back to a safe position. Now." As the firefighting team began moving quickly away from the danger, Captain Harris and Sarah ran back to join the group. The gray wolf, which had stayed behind in the forest, appeared again, running alongside them as if ensuring they would get out of the danger zone. Even as the team retreated, the flames continued to advance, and the heat became increasingly unbearable. Harris knew they needed a quick solution to prevent the fire from reaching the fuel, but time was against them. That's when he had a desperate idea. "Sarah, we need to create a containment barrier here and now. If we can divert the fire, maybe we can buy enough time to fully evacuate." Sarah looked at Harris with determination. "I'm with you, Captain. What do we need to do?" Harris quickly gave the instructions. They would use the tools and equipment they had on hand to dig a trench and fell trees around the area to create a natural barrier. The idea was to force the fire to change direction, avoiding the critical area of the cavern. With the help of the rest of the team, they began working frantically, digging and felling trees while the gray wolf continued to move around, as if it were checking to ensure the danger was truly being contained. The tension was thick in the air, and every second felt like an eternity as they tried to hold back the fire. As they worked, the flames drew closer and closer to the dangerous area. Sweat poured down Harris and Sarah's faces, and exhaustion began to weigh on them. But they couldn't give up. Harris, his eyes fixed on the advancing fire, knew they were racing against time. Finally, the barrier began to take shape. They had managed to dig a trench wide enough to divert part of the fire, but they still didn't know if it would be enough. With adrenaline running high, they finished the work and stepped back, anxiously watching to see if the makeshift barrier would hold back the advancing flames. The fire reached the edge of the trench, licking at the freshly dug earth and fallen trees. For a moment, it seemed as though everything was about to collapse. The flames leapt and danced dangerously close to the barrier, threatening to cross to the other side. But gradually, the barrier began to work. The flames started to change direction, veering off to the side and burning in a less dangerous area of the forest. A collective sigh of relief swept through the firefighting team, but it wasn't yet time to relax. Harris knew they needed to ensure the fire was completely contained before they could declare victory. "Great job, everyone! But we're not done yet. Let's keep monitoring the situation and make sure no sparks cross the barrier." As the team maintained their watch, the gray wolf continued to move through the forest, sniffing and watching, as if it were ensuring that the danger had truly passed. It hadn't strayed far, always staying within sight, like a silent guardian of the forest and the humans it had chosen to help. As time passed, the fire was slowly brought under control. The barrier had worked, and the area around the cavern was safe, at least for the moment. The firefighters began regrouping, exhausted but relieved that they had managed to avoid the worst. Harris approached Sarah and Mike, who were dirty and tired but with smiles of relief on their faces. "We did it," Harris said, his voice hoarse from the effort and tension. "But we wouldn't have made it without that wolf's help." He knew something was wrong from the start. Sarah looked at the gray wolf, now standing a short distance away, watching them with its piercing eyes. "He led us here, and thanks to him, we avoided a catastrophe." It's as if he knew exactly what to do. Mike, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "That wolf, he saved our lives today, and many others as well." The gray wolf, as if understanding what they were saying, lifted its head and let out a soft howl that echoed through the forest. It was a sound of victory, but also a warning, a reminder that nature is both an ally and a force to be respected. Harris, feeling a deep gratitude for what had happened, took off his helmet and made a brief bow toward the wolf. "Thank you, old friend. You're the true hero here." With that, the gray wolf, as if its mission was complete, turned and disappeared into the shadows of the forest, leaving behind a team of firefighters who would never forget what they had witnessed that day. With the gray wolf disappearing into the forest, the firefighting team began to process what had just happened. The immediate danger had been averted, but the tension still hung in the air. The firefighters continued to monitor the site, ensuring that the flames were completely extinguished and that there was no risk of a new fire breaking out. The exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone, but the sense of relief and gratitude for having prevented an even greater tragedy permeated the atmosphere. Captain Harris, though exhausted, couldn't stop thinking about the gray wolf. How could a wild animal, which should have feared and avoided humans, demonstrate such a deep understanding of the situation? It was something he couldn't explain, but it only reinforced the mysterious and powerful connection between humans and nature. "Captain, the fire is completely under control," Sarah said, breaking into his thoughts. "I think we can finally say the situation is contained." Harris nodded, feeling a wave of relief. "Good work, Sarah. All of you did an incredible job today. We saved lives, and that's what matters." Mike, who had been checking equipment with the other team members, approached. "Captain, we can start packing up and getting ready to head back. I think everyone deserves a good night's rest after all this." "Definitely," Harris agreed, smiling. "Let's pack everything up and head back to the base. We have to report what happened, but we also need to make sure we mention our furry friend who helped us avoid a catastrophe." As the firefighters began to gather their equipment and prepare to return to town, Captain Harris reflected on what had happened. He knew that if it weren't for the gray wolf, they might not have discovered the danger in time. The fuel-filled cavern was a ticking time bomb, and the wolf had led them straight to it, saving not only the forest but also many human lives. On the way back to Pine Valley, silence filled the fire truck. Everyone was tired, but the weight of what they had avoided was still fresh in their minds. When they arrived in town, they were met with worried looks and questions from residents who had seen the fire from a distance and feared the worst. Harris explained what had happened, omitting the more terrifying details about the cavern but mentioning the crucial role of the gray wolf. "We had some unexpected help today," he told the gathered residents. "A wolf led us to where the danger was. Thanks to him, we were able to prevent a tragedy." The residents, who had always regarded wolves with a mix of respect and fear, were surprised by the story. It was rare to hear of a wolf acting so closely with humans, let alone to help them. The story of the gray wolf quickly spread throughout the town, and soon everyone was talking about the hero wolf that had saved Pine Valley. In the days that followed, the firefighting team received numerous messages of thanks from the community. Everyone was aware of how close they had come to disaster, and the presence of the gray wolf in the story added an almost mythical element to the narrative. Harris, however, felt that the story was not yet complete. He decided that on his next day off, he would return to the forest, not to investigate or work, but simply to walk and, perhaps, see the gray wolf again. There was something about that wolf that he felt he needed to understand better. When the day came, Harris rose early and went into the forest. He followed the same path he had taken with the firefighting team, but this time he was alone. The forest was quiet, except for the sound of birds and the rustling of leaves in the wind. Harris walked for hours, absorbing the serenity of the place and reflecting on the events of the past few days. When he reached the spot where they had found the fire, something unexpected happened. The gray wolf emerged from the shadows, just as it had the first time. Its eyes gleamed with the same intensity, and it looked at Harris as if it had been waiting for him. Harris stood still, not wanting to startle the wolf. He didn't know what he expected from this encounter, but he felt it was important. "I don't know if you can understand me," Harris began to speak, his voice soft. "But I wanted to thank you. Without you, many of us wouldn't be here today." The wolf remained where it was, watching Harris intently. For a moment, the two stood in silence, simply staring at each other. Harris felt a strange sense of peace, as if the wolf was telling him that everything was all right, that it had fulfilled its role and could now move on. After a while, the gray wolf finally turned and began to walk back into the forest. Harris watched until it disappeared among the trees, knowing that this encounter would be something he would never forget. He felt grateful not only for the help the wolf had given, but also for having had the chance to witness something so rare and powerful. When Harris returned to Pine Valley, he knew that something inside him had changed. The experience had not only been a lesson about the destructive power of fire, but also about the deep connection that exists between all forms of life. He understood that sometimes help comes from where we least expect it, and that nature, despite its wildness, possesses a wisdom that many humans have yet to understand. The days that followed that encounter in the forest were calm in Pine Valley. The fire had been completely contained, and the town began to return to its normal routine. However, the story of the gray wolf continued to resonate among the residents, like a living legend that had now become part of the small community's identity. Captain Harris, for his part, felt that he had gained a new perspective on his own life and the work he did. He had always been a man dedicated to his duty, but the encounter with the gray wolf had taught him something deeper: the importance of listening to what nature is trying to say, of being attentive to the signs we often ignore in our busy daily lives. A week after the fire, Harris gathered his team for an informal meeting at the fire station. Everyone was still recovering from the physical and emotional toll of that day, but there was a sense of camaraderie and relief among them. "I just wanted to say how proud I am of all of you," Harris began, looking at each member of the team. "We faced something that could have ended very badly, but we made it, and that wouldn't have been possible without teamwork and, of course, the unexpected help we received." Sarah smiled, remembering the gray wolf. "I never thought a wolf could be our hero." It was as if he knew exactly what needed to be done. Mike, ever the pragmatist, added, "Nature has its ways of surprising us. I think we should remember that, both in our work and in life." Harris nodded, feeling that those words were true. "I agree, Mike. And I think we should carry that lesson with us. We are not alone in this world, and sometimes help comes from where we least expect it. We should always be open to that." The meeting ended with a renewed sense of purpose among the team. Everyone knew that their work was vital, but now they also understood that they were connected to something bigger, a natural cycle of life that included not only humans but also animals, trees, and even the flames they fought. That night, Harris decided to take a walk around the town. He strolled through the quiet streets of Pine Valley, where people waved and smiled at him, recognizing the work that he and his team had done. There was a sense of gratitude in the air, not just for the fact that the town had been saved, but also for what that experience represented for everyone. As he passed the edge of town, Harris came across a small group of residents gathered around a campfire. They were telling stories, as was customary on cold nights, and Harris realized they were talking about the gray wolf. He quietly approached, listening as one of the town's elders recounted the story with an almost mythical touch. "And they say the gray wolf still watches over our forest," the elder said, his voice filled with reverence. "He's a guardian, a presence that protects us even when we can't see him. And we should always remember to respect the forest, because it's what takes care of us, just as we must take care of it." Harris smiled to himself, feeling at peace with what he had heard. He knew that this story would become part of Pine Valley's folklore, a reminder of the day when a wolf saved the town from disaster. And, more than that, he knew that the lesson they had learned about respect, connection, and care for nature would live on in future generations. When night finally fell, Harris returned home, where he sat on his porch, looking out at the mountains that surrounded Pine Valley. The moon shone brightly in the sky, and the stars twinkled as if they were celebrating the triumph of that day. As he gazed at the horizon, he heard, in the distance, a lone howl echoing through the mountains. It was a familiar sound, but this time, instead of causing fear or alarm, it brought a sense of comfort. Harris knew that the gray wolf was out there, watching, keeping the forest safe. With one last look at the starry sky, Harris stood up and went inside his house, feeling a deep gratitude for what he had experienced. He knew that, although his work was important, he was just a part of something much bigger. And in that moment, he felt at peace, knowing that, thanks to the help of an extraordinary wolf, Pine Valley would continue to thrive, safe and protected. And so, the story of the gray wolf became a legend in Pine Valley, remembered for generations as the day when nature showed its most compassionate side, joining forces with humans in an act of courage and solidarity. A story that would always be told, not just as a tale of heroes, but as a reminder of the unbreakable connection we all share with the world around us.